the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. Good to be back again. Today we have Andrew Fox joining us from Aruba and Mark Duncan from Cyclone Computers. Andrew, good to have you here.
Thanks you very much.
Thanks
Great
for coming
to be
back on again. It can't have been too painful last time.
No,
the fact that we managed to get you back into the studio.
Fantastic experience. No, it was good.
Maybe you can remind folks where you fit into this big wide world of tech here in New Zealand.
So I lead the team at Aruba, which is the part of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise that looks after networks and the edge, the intelligent edge, we call it. Amazing team of people, high growth business, great tech, and network is a fun place to be. So that's where I fit in.
Great. Excellent. Mark Duncan, how about you?
Yes, I'm one of those services managers for Cyclone Computers. So we're a nationwide company doing IT support and integration, etc. And we're excited to be here again, Paul.
Yeah, no, great to have you both back. Well, let's jump straight into it. As always, lots to talk about. Thank you, of course, to our show partners as well: 2 Degrees, Vodafone, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology, and of course Cyclone and Aruba. Woohoo! And this week on the local front, I guess probably there are 2 pretty big stories really. Google setting up in New Zealand with a cloud region. So I think for many people it was quite a surprise when Microsoft announced, hey, we're setting up a local region in New Zealand. AWS did it, and I think there were some like, oh, okay, it's this
a little country like ours.
It's like a windfall.
And now it's Google. So it sort of feels a bit like we've hit the trifecta here, and we're probably a lot luckier than a lot of people thought that New Zealand might be when we started seeing these large scale or hyperscale, as we hear them called, data centers sort of start to appear around the world. I mean, in the early days, it was all just in the US, right? And it was, and then we're seeing a little bit in Asia and Europe and so on. But
Sydney, Melbourne, and now here.
Considering what percentage of the world's population resides in New Zealand,
they must be getting
it's really awesome.
Now. They must be getting capacity. They've built it up over the number of years. So Microsoft especially must have a reasonable amount of business in New Zealand.
I think it's a beautiful thing from a customer choice perspective. Everyone I talk to is involved in some sort of, to use the overused word, but digital transformation or something like that. And a lot of that involves one of those 3. And I think now there's 3 really good solid options coming. It'll be a bit of time, but 3 good solid options that Kiwis can use. And I think that's an amazing thing for our market. And yes, I was surprised as well.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look back, I remember in the early years of the show, we were, we sort of pondered a little bit around connectivity to New Zealand, even, right? Like, with a lot of data and services coming from offshore, and then what happens if I don't know, someone's deliberately or otherwise decides to impact our connectivity to the outside world. But boy, that picture has changed, and now so much more of what has been offshore will be able to actually,
I guess, that's
come home to New Zealand.
Sidestep some of that risk.
Faster licensing.
Yeah. So this is all really good stuff, and we've heard about. I'm sure it was Rarotonga. Rarotonga got effectively kind of knocked offline for.
Oh, really?
Weeks at a time, with an issue with their telecommunications at one point. Where did we have the volcano last year?
Yeah,
so
Tonga had a really nasty problem after a storm as well.
There are all sorts of things that can impact, and the more digital that we get as a society.
How many cables do we have going now? Because they put another one on recently, didn't they?
Yeah, so we've most recently we've had the Southern Cross next. Yeah. So we've got the original Southern Cross cable. That was starting to get a bit older, but I don't think it had actually reached its
capacity, yeah.
complete technical capacity, and so you've got the new and that's it's a redundant one, so it's effectively two. And then you've got the Hawaii Eki cable. You've got the Tasman Global Access, which links us up with Australia.
Yep.
And then there's talk about links across to South America.
Really?
So there's all sorts of
So many changes.
activity going on. I don't think I've missed any, but I may have done. I mean, compared to where we were
with one wet piece of string.
It's
Yeah.
dramatically changed. So
I would
really
imagine
encouraging.
the streaming will be pushing that up more and more. The actual bandwidth required.
Well, I think most of this, the Netflixes of this world have had local infrastructure on the
Caching,
ground, and Google have certainly had YouTube caching service sort of sitting in with our internet providers. So there has been a level of that, and certainly those aren't my areas of expertise, but I've heard enough to believe that between Netflix and YouTube, and I mean you can probably just do a few pings to figure that stuff out to a degree. But I think a fair bit of that has come locally. But I mean this brings so much more home to New Zealand, doesn't it? If we've got Google, AWS, and Microsoft able to deliver services and host I guess a very high percentage of what we do locally here in New Zealand.
I wonder if that will drive up more adoption with some of those bigger players who still host those servers internally, on-prem. Will it push that cloud further for them?
Well, I guess my feeling is certainly the smaller businesses. Most of them have been on a journey if they haven't got there already, where everything's in the cloud.
Yeah.
And then there are different, and sometimes more complex cases, I think, usually for larger organizations around, how they do that. And there are some cost challenges with certain loads to put them into the cloud, right? Where it's not very competitive.
Maybe there will be some that were worried about latency and things like that. Maybe, that problem's gone away. As we see, forgetting the data center for a minute, but as we see, network performance go up and new technologies like Wi-Fi 6 and now Wi-Fi 6E, which is, been announced here in the last sort of couple of weeks, that means that the client's ability to consume data, it makes it harder for the network and for the provider to then give me as a user a good experience. That I guess having these three in country is going to mean the user experience gets better, and that's what everything's ultimately about, right?
So let's face it, fibre to the door in New Zealand is great in comparison to the likes of Australia. We're sitting on easy street in terms of that. We're getting good speeds everywhere. Well, mostly everywhere.
We are in a very good position, I feel.
Absolutely.
In those regards, and certainly, we do like to make fun of our friends across the Tasman, and that's one of those areas where I feel we're at an All Blacks type level. Although I should be careful of that reference with how we're going on that front at the moment. To be
a bit murky, those waters.
Maybe the All Blacks are going to be looking at how we've gone on the broadband front and wishing they could do that well. No, I'll shut up on that. Don't get myself into
about the war.
Any trouble. Invenco has sold to a US firm. Now, this is one of Sir Peter Mears' firms, and look, we look at the things that he's done over the years, and Navman, and an incredible story, but out of Navman, not only did he go on to launch a number of other companies, but of course folks that were part of Navman have gone on and launched other things. So I find this was an $80 million US sale. which is, somewhere depending on, exchange rates, 120 plus million, New Zealand dollars. So this is a substantial sale. And look, I think the technology that they had putting these terminals into gas stations in the US, they did very, very well at. And they were working in a market that was, just crazy big compared to trying to create something that would focus on the New Zealand market. And look, the size of the scale, I think, is just an indication of how good, how good they were.
Good on them, right? Kiwi technology. I'd love to know what impact COVID's had on the use of, pay at pump. I don't know about you, but if I can avoid talking to a human now and do the whole thing at the pump with with PayWave, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So I suspect
if you're driving at all, though, so there's probably
there's
probably been some some pressures in terms of price of gas and so on, and we've certainly heard a bit about some of those challenges businesses that have been have been impacted.
Americans still get cheap petrol though, don't they? In comparison to like us and other parts of the world.
That's true.
So, but yeah, it seems like from the bits and pieces of coverage there's been on it that worked out as a good outcome for those involved, and no doubt there will continue to be Kiwis involved in it.
And as you say, that will hopefully seed other innovation around.
So good that he's taking it to the world, though, isn't it? And America, to win America is it's a good base. In fact, it's really, really hitting the top, isn't it?
That's certainly if you can win in that sort of size market, and often in the past, I guess particularly before New Zealand had so much of a focus on tech, Australia was kind of the often the focus. Okay, we've conquered New Zealand. Let's see how we can go in Australia. But I think that that mindset now of maybe looking globally as your market from the very, very beginning, or at least looking at really big markets like the US, there's an enormous amount of wisdom in taking that approach, isn't there?
It's taking a large step, really, isn't it? To sort of make it big.
Yeah. Yep. Now, their CEO, John Scott, one of the bits of reading I saw, commentary from him said that the petrol industry effectively stopped overnight there with COVID, and in 2020 those lockdowns hit and nothing happened, and they had staff voluntarily sacrificing their salaries between 20 and 50%. So they certainly went through a fairly tough time there for that was sort of 6 to 12 months, and folks were doing that in order to preserve jobs. So it's pretty awesome that they've gone through that, and now hopefully all those that were involved, and whether through working for the company or shareholders have come out of it in a pretty good,
much better place.
Pretty good way. So but yeah, quite likely with some of these sales that we've seen over the last couple of years, and there's probably a lot that have been would have been quite impacted in ways that is not always public, but you got to imagine that probably plays into the numbers that some of these sales have gone for. But still, I think probably ends up being a pretty pretty good win.
Good win,
yeah. So now onto other topics in the consumer world, which is we all we can delve into the business stuff, but ultimately we're all consumers as well. I was quite surprised hearing news last week around Disney overtaking Netflix when that one hit, and it just I don't know, it caught me off guard. I certainly hadn't hadn't been seeing any numbers, but they hit 221.1 million subscriptions. Now, this is across their 3 streaming platforms because so this is Disney in total and not just Disney Plus. So as far as I'm aware, it incorporates Disney Plus, Hulu, or Hulu Plus as it's I think it's normally been known, or for the paid offering, and ESPN Plus. Right. So they've kind of, they've got this combination of services. And I think, maybe in some of the coverage, it's sort of suggested that it's just the Disney Plus product, but it's actually the
combination.
The combination.
How long
of
have they
services.
been going? How long is this? A year and a half? 2 years?
It's a good question.
Hulu Plus has been going for longer than that.
Yeah, Hulu's been around for for a long
Plus,
time. Or one of the one of the earliest players.
As far as streaming platform companies out there, who else could beat Netflix? Disney. Really.
Well, Netflix has been the golden child for years. The killer of Blockbuster, and many an MBA written, about it. I think it's kind of fascinating. The Disney bring a whole new level. This is a mega company with capabilities far beyond any normal company. Even just the amount of content that they own. The Star Wars franchise, all the stuff that they kind of bring
and they've paid millions
in
for
demand.
All that.
Yeah, correct. But it's in demand, and they also tend to play better to a younger audience. The Disney princess. Suddenly you've got a bunch of new markets and new demographics that float to your platform. I think it's really, really clever. I do wonder they're a little bit cheaper at the moment, but no promise that they're going to stay that way. In fact,
they've actually announced that they're putting prices up on Disney Plus.
What's it cost at the moment? It's about
at least
$13 New Zealand.
$13 New Zealand dollars, I believe. Yeah, $12.99. So
Netflix is about $29.
Well, they've got a range of plans. So they go from that. I think that's about the same price point, $13 as their base plan, up to maybe it's
multi-screen,
25
4K, and
but I realized, because I've been on Netflix for a fair time, sort of pre-launching in New Zealand. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I know how that works.
And I was looking the other day and thinking, boy, this Netflix is expensive, and I must still be on whatever I signed up with in US dollars. And they've gone past $20, so I'm paying north of $30 now. So I need to get in and sort that out. I'm paying quite a premium, and I'm probably a lot of the time just looking at the New Zealand catalog. Although there are still some mechanisms.
I'm interested in it's that expensive in America, because America normally is very competitive with the other streaming platforms. So I'm surprised it's more.
Well, when you're that big and that dominant, I guess there's
charge a bit more, maybe.
I mean, the idea of sort of turning these different knobs, and you're looking to make a profit, so you want to turn the price up. Probably for, a couple of perspectives. One, they do want to be profitable at some point, right? You've got shareholders that are pushing for that. But also, if you're not bringing in enough from your subscriptions, how do you get the content that keeps you at the front? And clearly, Disney are a strong competitor on the content front, and we've got Apple, and then local free to air type options, as well as Sky and the things that they're streaming. So we're getting into quite a crowded market, aren't we?
I dare say at some point in time there'll be a bit of a culling go on, like all things.
Or
you get all these different
spree or
startups and stuff, and then at some point they meet some sort of mass market, and then they start getting either falling off or being bought up
by someone.
Well, I mean, part of the question is, does it just naturally all go to global players, or will we be able to keep our local players in the market? Now, at the moment, because of the role that free to air TV plays, and the fact that some of that is government entity, then you can imagine there's some longevity. But we look at TV3 and how many kind of iterations and shareholding changes and varying other financial challenges that that they've had. Sky have certainly had their problems. I mean, this is not it's not an easy market to operate in, due to
As a local
size
player,
and scale
absolutely.
and so on. There'll be other markets like that. Australia seems to have, probably a broader mix of local players in the market, but who knows how that will play out. And then in Asia, we've got some of these players that are right across a whole bunch of countries, and it seems like there's some benefits there from a scale perspective to that.
I can well imagine the big boys will start buying up bits and pieces, but it'll be up to governments in various countries to actually protect their own local interests. I can see the EU doing that. I think there already is some sort of, guidelines around filming and producing stuff in their country. So I can only see that over time, and I'm sure we'll do it with TVNZ. I'm sure we'll do that at some point to protect our local interests or national interests, our own content. And New Zealand On There has done a pretty good job in the past of funding local productions.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly been a lot of funds that have gone into local. So I would certainly hope that we have a good offering. Now, just going back a little bit of history, I just found quite curious. So it was January 2007 that Netflix announced that they were going to launch streaming video.
Same year as the iPhone. There we go.
Is it really? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So going back quite a way, Hulu launched in March 2008.
Okay.
And not seeing here when Netflix actually launched. Maybe they announced and launched pretty much straight away.
So Hulu, that was a streaming
straight
channel?
away. So Hulu was, as I recall it anyway, was a mix of broadcast type content.
Yeah.
Maybe it was under NBC. I'm not quite sure. What does it say now? So the current ownership, actually 67% owned by Disney, which I don't think it was back in those days.
Yeah.
But it was probably similar to what we get with the streaming from TVNZ today, and that sort of broadcast content that you could watch in a streaming format for free, ad supported. And then there was the Hulu Plus name, which maybe that's actually disappeared. I'm not seeing it mentioned too much as I look around online now, as the more expensive option where you could
No ads.
get rid of ads or see more content. It was sort of a little bit of a mix of plans, and we're sort of starting to see that come back. We're starting to see probably TVNZ at some point offer quite possibly an ad-free offering, and Netflix offering a lower cost option with the advertising built in.
I don't think it's over yet. I think Netflix have had a hard time. They've taken all the heat about the actions they're taking to stop you sharing your account, and there's been some bad press, and they've had some fake subscriber numbers or dodgy things like that. I think as Disney and the rest of them start raising their prices and stuff, I think we're just going to continuously see this. I don't think it's over yet. I wouldn't.
It's competition.
I wouldn't write Netflix off yet, but some of the content they're creating is amazing. Then again, so is Apple TV. Winning an Oscar and for
a lot of that content is years in the pipeline as well. So it's not like it's going to stop overnight. It takes a lot of time to get.
Just makes it harder for a consumer, doesn't it? You don't want to be subscribing to 5 services.
No,
but certainly we're spoiled for choice. But
yeah, we are now.
It was about 2.5 years ago that we saw Disney Plus land in the US, and then sort of shortly thereafter
a few months later, wasn't it?
Into New Zealand. Now Roomba, which is a product from IRobot, Roomba and the IRobot products. Which I guess share their name with a rather sort of dystopian movie as
Yes,
well.
yes.
Was that a Will
Add a
Smith
comma.
movie?
Yeah, that's a
I,
Will
comma,
Smith movie.
robot or whatever it was.
Yeah.
As three laws. Or whatever it was.
So, but yeah, here we are today, and IRobot and the Roomba vacuum robotic vacuum cleaners have been sold for $1.7 billion to Amazon. This one I've found quite fascinating with the different sort of media coverage, and it's kind of moved around a little bit, but there's certainly been a fair bit of hey, this is so Amazon can see inside your home and take footage of your home and map out your home and so on, and kind of making it sound very, very scary.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I would think if that was the way that Amazon was inclined, there are certainly other ways of sort of getting data.
They already own my door.
about
Already
people's
own my
homes.
doorbell, and
Yeah, they've got.
they see
they've
everyone
got,
that comes to my
you know,
house. Yeah, that's right.
footage.
What's the
They've
point?
got and in a lot of homes they'll have microphones and cameras already. Look, if these sort of companies start doing, more and more untoward stuff, then they're not going to have a place in our homes
I'd prefer to
at
think.
all, right?
I prefer to think the best in this case. Like there are potentially, IoT, obviously, big interest of mine. But the more about spatial layout of a house, and potentially there's some other knock-on benefits that I might be able to get out of that. So, yeah, I don't think Amazon, knowing that I've got a dog lying in the middle of the floor that won't move for the vacuum cleaner, and that does happen at my house, but I don't think that's that's not proprietary information. They're welcome to that. I would be stuck without the vacuum though, because my dog is hairy and I have a white floor. So
is it good? You find it's good kit?
It's good for it's never going to be as good as a elbow grease, but in terms of a quick sweep while you're out of the house, beautiful thing.
Does the dog bark at it?
Doesn't really care. Just gets out of the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see some of the other robot vacuums that have been getting a bit of attention, recently. And I'm trying to remember the exact product name. Somebody will probably send me a tweet or a message later to remind me. But there's some competing products that are considered by many to be a whole lot better, I think, coming out of China. And so, I guess, if you're going with any of this sort of stuff, look, there are risks in terms of, what can happen with your data. But you got to make those calls if you got microphones and things like that around the place, which, got to, if we're straight up, we accept actually most of us are carrying, a smartphone or more in terms of devices that are around our homes. So it is a big and a complex situation that we have in terms of the devices and software and so on. And there are some risks, and we'll delve in a bit to sort of cybersecurity as we in a few minutes. But I think we also have to have some wisdom, and you have to kind of weigh up the, what are the benefits you get out of this, and who do you trust? And look, I get it. There will be some that never want to put their trust in a big American, corporation, and sure. So we can make our own choices on.
I am kind of excited to see what else comes out or into the Amazon smart home stable. I think. They potentially, for someone that has an interest in that, it's kind of cool. So
I wonder where they'll take it.
Well, that's just it. Where will they go next? They've got
Well, I think there can be a positive aspect here, and Ring's an example. They actually, I was scheduled to meet with and do an interview with Ring's founder and CEO Jamie. I can't remember his surname exactly. Something like Simonov or along those lines. I've probably completely butchered that.
Sorry, Jamie.
At CES a few years ago, but I think there was a little bit of a hoo-ha going on around some security issues that Ring had at the time. Now, because Ring are part of Amazon, then Amazon's reputation, became at stake because of that. And so, what we saw was they made sure, I imagine at the top level, that there were resources that went in to address some of those challenges. And so, if IRobot or if Ring or another company that Amazon has acquired, make a mess of stuff, then
I'm sure they'll be
actually
very
it
paranoid.
messes things up for Amazon and for AWS. So there is that aspect to, well, in some ways it could lead to good things, maybe on that sort of security and data privacy front. And I also imagine then suddenly they've got access to this much bigger team within AWS.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That could potentially help them accelerate maybe faster than some of the other players in the market.
I do think it will help. If you look at the way inside an enterprise, a security camera, the way you might secure that and the way you might keep yourself safe, because something can always happen to that device. Today, if you're building an enterprise network, having it set up in such a way that this camera can just talk to the server it's supposed to talk to, nothing else, or can talk to the cloud service it's supposed to talk to, nothing else. That's kind of par for the course now, and it's easily done. But you're sticking a Ring camera or a vacuum cleaner or whatever it is in the middle of your house, you're less likely to have that sort of protection and security. So, maybe it will help drive some of those technologies, and it is possible, just not common, to drive those technologies, into the house. Maybe that's a good thing.
It's very easy to go buy some of these cloud integrated products. I mean, I bought a security camera from Kmart, of all places. Just happened to be standing in the line, and my wife wants to be able to look at the dog, during the daytime, as they do. So I bought the $75 camera. It literally took me a minute to set up. It was so easy. But I don't know. It just goes up to the cloud, and
the cloud.
I'm just like, right, okay.
And wherever else it should choose to go in your house. That's I think the trick.
I mean, they're welcome to look at it at the garage, but
not that exciting.
it's just so simple. I just think people go for the ease and convenience. Oh, yeah, it's great, but where's it going? It's a bit scary.
We certainly are progressing down the ease and convenience track more with some of these things. I think. I remember the first sort of Ring device in terms of setup and so on. That stuff's got easier because they've, I don't know, they've added whatever they've added in to the process, but and certainly not just their product. A whole range of these products that were like, quite clumsy and difficult to set up, and they've just got a whole lot easier over the past few years.
Well, you scan your QR code and hey, it's done.
So, that's right. Why
you're
you
away
go.
laughing.
One aspect I'm curious about is that IRobot have been focused, as most of these sort of robotic vacuum cleaners and security type, surveillance type products like the Ring doorbells and so on, have been very much consumer focused, right? Yep. It's a big market, totally makes sense. But if you think about how many offices that there are in, and let's just pick North America, let alone anywhere else in the world, there's a lot of office space. And if you kind of, you think about a lot of these places, big flat floors, you go into homes and you've got stairs and all these other things, and it's like, robot's not much good at, dealing with those sorts of things just yet. I wonder whether this would change with this acquisition, because from Amazon's perspective, they must have many millions of square meters of floor space in factories and offices, et cetera, et cetera.
A robot army. Now it does sound like a movie.
But don't you get those big industrial ones where they can, you can get lawnmowers now, which can be, I think they can be automated. And I'm pretty sure they've got those industrial cleaners that go around factories and clean stuff up. Why not?
Yeah. So be interesting to see how that evolves. But
Alexa,
there'd be a lot of cleaners out of work though.
But I think I remember in our previous premises we got one and tried it out, and it was kind of like, okay, this technology needs to develop a little bit further, but it's interesting to test the technology.
True.
And I imagine it will play quite a big role in that sort of corporate cleaning in the
a
future.
good point.
And it's not
That's a good
going to
point.
it's not going to
Don't
make the roles disappear.
No.
But I'm sure that they're probably having the same sort of issues in terms of resourcing as in lots of other fields. So if you can add a robot in that does a percentage of the job, then probably
Bring it
quite
on.
helpful. Right. What else? What else did we want to delve into? Couple of other things before we talk about some pretty big cybersecurity scenarios.
Oh,
Actually, this one does fall into cybersecurity as well. And I picked this one up on the Register UK site, which covers some quite fascinating stories. And their headline read, "Bloke robbed of $800,000 in cryptocurrency by fake wallet app wants payback from Google." And look, I was thinking about this. We as consumers, or whether you look at it from a software developer perspective or a consumer perspective, Google and Apple take a big slice, right? Was it usually around 30%, of any app that you're paying through whether it's the Play Store or the App Store.
Yep.
And so I don't know. I kind of feel like, hold on.
What do you get for that 30%?
Yeah, this person's lost $800,000 worth of cryptocurrencies. It's fair enough to have a bit of a go at Google for launching this app. And what he downloaded was a fake. It was called Phantom Wallet, and so he was. I think he was using. Using Phantom. Technology, probably an online wallet or something. Was using their service, and he was looking to see if they had a Google Play app. Sure enough, they did. Google, an Android app is what I'm trying to say. Through the Play Store, and he downloaded it, and
put his credentials in, and away it went.
That's a pretty large chunk of money. So
I'm sure Google has some T's and C's that says something along the lines of all care and no responsibility. I'm sure that's something somewhere in there.
It's funny, isn't it? Because Apple get a lot of stones thrown at them about how hard they make it, and the hurdles to get an app into the App Store, which I'm sure if I was an app developer, I'd probably agree with it. But you do tend to hear, and I'm sure the answer is not zero, but you do tend to hear less stories about this kind of thing happening in the App Store. Is it because of those hurdles? Maybe, easier to get an app into the Play Store. You don't have to be in there for long if you're stealing $800,000 a time. You only got to be up for a short time.
on your development, isn't it?
I did remember reading the article. Actually, one of the funny things I did think was the relative value of his portfolio in the intervening few weeks or whenever it was. Right. The portfolio is tanked, so he's not quite as well off as he would have been anyway.
So it depends what they pay you back in, right?
Correct.
We've seen some of those stories where things have gone up or down in crypto in intervening times when funds have been returned. Or
if they were to give him the same currencies,
otherwise,
he would be significantly worse off.
But then he could argue, well, I would have sold that in the interim, etc. So who knows?
I agree with you. I think they do owe us a duty of care.
It's a lot of money to rely on I don't know how much the app was, but maybe $10 app. It's a lot of cash.
It was probably a free app because there wasn't actually an app available, an official app available from Phantom. In fact, they tweeted out at some stage, Phantom is not available on iOS or Android. They tweeted. And they said, using a fake Phantom mobile app will result in your funds being stolen. Please help us by reporting these apps when you see them in app stores. And so this company has been having to go back to Google and constantly report these dodgy apps. So look, I'm not sure what would be an appropriate payout, whether you pay a tenth of it, 100%, 200%. I mean, who knows? But you do feel as though there's maybe a little bit of culpability there on Google to do a better job. Anyway, that's enough said on that one. And the other one that the Register had some coverage was, and this was picked up off I think something was on Reddit. and it was these autonomous cars that have been doing the rounds in San Francisco from Cruise, and someone had put a photo online of a whole lot of these driverless Cruise vehicles. They're basically stuck blocking an intersection, and the commentary on Twitter was that it was that was on the post on Reddit that then reappeared on Twitter was a couple of hours of these things kind of just stuck in a sort of frozen.
Sounds like Auckland
frozen state in the middle of the night by the sounds of it. So probably in terms of the actual
Impact.
disruption,
Yeah, right.
it might have been quite low. But these are probably things we hear about the positives of where the technology is going and taking us and so on. But I think it's also worth being aware. It's a bit of a journey to get there, and there might be a few stops and stuff
Along the way.
But any technology, there's always a few hurdles to get over, isn't it?
I don't have a self-driving car, but if I did, I'd probably be happy with the fail open, i.e. if you're not sure what you're doing or what's going on, please stop. I think that's and maybe that's what happened in this case. Who knows?
Yeah. Now I wanted to obviously be having both of you here, and we've been talking about when we spoke last time a lot about sort of cybersecurity, the role of the network. There've been a couple of big stories that have been in the media, and probably the particularly around cybersecurity that I think for me sort of trigger some thinking and a need for some discussion. First was Cisco confirming they had a network breach recently after one of their employees had I believe it to be a personal Google account on a device that then that had passwords saved in it, and when that account was compromised, basically opened up access to Cisco's network, and then we had Twilio, who were they were also hit. So we're seeing these firms that these are big names globally and in Silicon Valley, where they're based. Who if you're thinking well, who is it that might be hack proof? You might look at the big companies, but of course, the reality is
nobody is hack proof.
There isn't such a thing, is there? And this is just a reminder to us that we have to keep working on stepping up our cybersecurity.
It could have been almost.
I feel sorry for them,
company.
though. I feel sorry for Cisco. I mean, but the amount of damage that was done was minimal and well controlled, though, wasn't it?
I mean, it depends how you look at it. Somebody got in and hackers were able to extract a chunk of data that they shouldn't have been able to. Now I think what I mean, initially when I saw this, people were saying, "Oh, good on Cisco for being open and honest about it." Look, I think generally nobody wants to talk about this stuff, right? Because there's embarrassment, there's shame, there's a financial impact to your business of, can we trust this firm and so on. All of these things that can happen. But as you say, Andrew, this could have happened to any of us. But I think the information actually came out, took place in May. The information was made public, and it seems as though, following that, then Cisco have sort of come out and shared a little bit more detail of how this access to their VPN, took place.
So in America, are they required to reveal when they've had a breach? I think they are, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
most countries now, Western countries are.
I think it's as you say, there is a stigma to it, and I think that drives behaviors. It means people don't want to talk about it. Whereas in reality, if one of my vendors that I use in my life got hacked, if they'd, cybersecurity is a really complicated thing. There's a lot of moving parts, and the bad guys are adapting and changing all the time. If this company had done nothing at all to protect itself and my data, nothing at all, then actually, I'm going to have an absolute crack. But many of the customers I talk to, they've got multiple levels of protection, and it ends up being a human that clicks, on something
Yeah.
silly that ends up tipping over the whole thing. But, there's a lot of cracks and a lot of moving parts. And I think we need to change. A, we need to talk about it some more and be more open about how difficult this is. And B, if companies are making an honest effort to protect
Which I'm sure
me and
Cisco
my
are.
data, then,
Yeah.
well, I go head to head with Cisco all day. But in this case, I actually think, they're a little bit hard done by. I can see how you can't watch all those.
We all know that 90% of most cyber attacks happen from user error. Call it. That's just the life we live in right now. Will it get better or worse? Who knows? But as you said before, it's all about attackers just want to get in, and so they'll keep adapting and trying to get around what's there.
Yeah, but we do need to keep, stepping up.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I had it
It will
really
never stop.
Yeah, I was at an event last week. I was, speaking from a cybersecurity perspective in terms of, how to minimize and address risks and, the value of, getting in and auditing these things and finding out actually where you're at on, a bunch of
With that
metrics
remediation.
and so on, because that stuff's really important. But I was in this really unique position, and I guess because it was a small event with a group of leaders and organizations that I think probably knew each other reasonably well, and one of them got up and shared firsthand experience of their organization having been, hit with ransomware. And it was really, really good to actually have that
Correct.
real world firsthand experience, the pressure, the stress that it created for their people to address it, how it, completely took their focus, off
away from whatever the business
whatever they
actually
were
was.
supposed to
Yep.
be doing,
Yep.
And onto this, and that it took an extended period to address it, and it was really, really horrible. But what was awesome was he got somebody actually giving you that that firsthand story. And the reality is most people don't want to talk about this, and so we don't have that many stories. When I look back, sort of, I don't know, when we were all learning that data should be backed up, and not only backed up, that you actually needed to, do disaster recovery tests and, check your logs and make sure your data could actually be recovered, all those sorts of things. But the reason that everybody put good systems in place was because either the organization or individuals involved had lost some data themselves, or they'd heard a story very close to home of somebody else that had, and so they put systems in place, right? But with the cyber incidents, we actually don't hear a huge amount of what happens, and it's massively underreported from all the things I can see.
I think it's a shame. There's 50 things, 50 things you can do to protect yourself. We need to be talking more about those 50 things.
Yeah.
And so encouraging companies to, I have these conversations all day, because the network, it doesn't all start and stop with the network, but it's a great place to start. It's the first line of defense for this sort of thing. And, a lot of people saying, how can, yes, we're doing this, we put Zscaler in, and we're doing or Netscope or whatever it is, and we've got firewalls, and we've got this, and we've got, our phishing tests, and we've got all these things. What else can we be doing? And that's the right question to be asking.
The thing that you mentioned, the one thing with the whole cybersecurity thing that not so much security, it's more about recovery, is backups. If you've got backups, it's very hard to protect yourself from everything. You can do your multi-layer protection, network, etc., to try and reduce your landscape of attack. But if you do get attacked, what's the one thing that will get you back up running? Is that backups. And, some companies have taken that on more and more, and there's more solutions.
Although that's a little weapons grade. Customers I've talked to now, given COVID and the fact all of our people are in different places than they were a couple of years ago, every night they head home and sit in the same network as teenage kids and stuff like that. Maybe the next day they're going to come back in with something that they didn't go home with the night before, and they sit down in the office and connect, and that process sort of starts. Even if, in the ideal world, we're going to contain the blast radius and take that device automatically off the network before it can do too much damage, right? But if the fix is take the business down and restore, the cost of being off the air is still absolutely
But
significant.
certainly in that case, you want to have those immutable backups, right?
Yes,
Yep.
That
absolutely.
Mark's talking
That should be
about,
plan D,
and
though,
you,
shouldn't
you
it?
do.
Yeah.
So that needs to be part of the mix, doesn't it? And I guess what we hear with some of these ransomware scenarios is people are paying out the ransom, and it's because those backups that we've heard about for for decades need to be solid, robust, etc.
Yeah.
And look, it is more complicated now because when the ransomware gets into your network, it's actually doing everything it can to mess with your backups.
Yep.
So it's not just tick a box. We've got backups in place. It's certainly more complex than that, isn't it?
So I have been involved with a cyber attack for a small company. It was about 30 odd staff. Got a call about sort of 11 o'clock saying, I've got a weird message on the screen asking me to pay something. And first response, shut everything down. And so we went in there and we finally discovered that a staff member had been sent a CV, a PDF, which wasn't a PDF. And he clicked on it, nothing happened. He kind of just went off with his business and then noticed things were going strange. And the long and short of it is that his machine encrypted around about a third of their data on the server, as well as problems with his machine. We got them up and running by about 1 o'clock the next day, fully restored.
Nice.
And the one thing that was the problem was the fact that they had administrator rights to their machines that they had specifically requested, ordained they wanted administrator rights to their machines so they could install things several months before, that we had said, no, we don't think that's very good. But they said, no, we want it. We want to be able to install, applications whenever we want. And we were like, no, but it's their machines.
Yep.
So we did it. And what happened was that someone clicked on something, started the malware, and off it went. So their impact was quite small. And we as they got audited because they did some work for a bank. So the company I worked for then, we got audited with what we did, as well as the company. So in actual fact, everything we had done was correct, apart from this administrator login. We had endpoint protection in place, we had backups on-site, off-site, we had everything in place. And it just turned out there was this one user clicked on something and off it went.
Now, how that would work nowadays, if Paul comes into the office and he's got his infected machine, he shouldn't have been browsing that stuff last night. That was a poor choice.
Here we go.
Yeah, no. So, typically, in a lot of these situations, it would perhaps be the firewall or something that would, the first thing to be aware of some sort of, attempt to connect with an external party, some command and control server or something like that. Nowadays the network can cope with that. Paul normally, as he's his role as employee, has access to these 10 things in the organization and, has an experience that looks, or feels like that.
Yeah.
As soon as Paul tries to do something dodgy or something that is out of the ordinary, we have the ability now to change that role. So suddenly Paul's device goes from being, employee to being quarantined, and it stops working for you, and then you ring the help desk and say, guys, hey, my device won't work.
We've come a long way.
Yeah,
if I go back, this is almost 8 years ago. It was a good learning experience. It was and we were pretty fast off the ball with it. And we got them back going the next day. But things have come a long way since back then. I mean, there's a lot more proactive products out there doing stuff with networks, everything else.
But your basic network now, and then I guess if there's any frustration that I take to work every day, it's the fact we can do this kind of stuff today with a network. And especially once you start laying on top AI and things like that, that can really help to look for, dodgy, out of the ordinary behavior and take some action. I think we've got to get better at those kinds of things. And so when Paul calls the help desk and says, my machine won't work, they go, we know. It's reported itself as quarantined and taken itself off the network. Yes, you've still got some work to do on Paul's machine and maybe a little bit more, but the blast radius is vastly reduced. Now that doesn't solve the problem, but if maybe these other 5 things that you're doing around cybersecurity, maybe the combination of all 5.
And that's why it's so important to have the layers, isn't
Correct.
it? Is to have that user education piece, to have, not have the admin privileges, to be following, guidance across a whole lot of areas, but the network piece is important. Now, thinking of network, we've got a world that really has changed from where we were before COVID in terms of how much work is being done from remote locations and home. How does that change things, and how is the technology options in terms of tying the network together? Because there have been new options
Absolutely.
over recent years in that regard. I guess it's probably really variable in terms of
Certainly is.
how these things are set up, and I guess there is that expectation these days. Yeah, I can take my device wherever and work from wherever,
Yep.
and however. But if your primary place of working actually, for a lot of people now, is your home.
There's a few more options if that's the case now. Short of a VPN client on your device, which tunnels back to the organization. A lot of people, in fact, most people do something similar now. But ultimately, you're still sitting on your home network. In my case, with teenagers, maybe not such a hot idea. But what we found during COVID is some of the basic enterprise security things that we can do on the enterprise network, like I was just talking about with, automatically changing roles and taking, responding to threats and things like that, or most excitingly, providing sort of dynamic policy. You're connecting a camera, it can only see the camera server. You're connecting a phone, it can only see the phone server. It's got no business seeing the point of sale, which stops a lot of the opportunity for nasty events to happen. But we found that, taking that technology back into the home office. So, in my case, I take my Aruba access point home and I plug it into the back of my broadband modem, and it will tunnel back to my organization and then present the corporate SSIDs in the middle of my lounge room with all the security and policy and protection that the enterprise requires. So now, actually, I don't care what I do care what my kids get up to, but in this context, you know what I mean? My machine is on a different network to them. My machine is on the HPE corporate network.
Yeah.
It's not on my home network. I mean, it physically is, I guess.
Yeah.
But it goes through it, but it tunnels through it, so it's secure.
So that's another layer, isn't it?
Yeah,
That becomes
another layer.
Absolutely,
important piece of the puzzle. So, how do you deal with these sorts of things at Cyclone with your client base? Because you must have, you've got quite a broad, broad mix, right? We've talked about, big educational institutions. I mean, you've got all sorts.
A lot of the school stuff is pushed through by the ministry. I mean, we're currently going through doing Windows Defender upgrades around schools, that's in the school space.
Yep.
It's probably in a lot of the commercial stuff we do, we focus on the device probably more. User training comes into that effect. Not everyone wants to do user training. They all talk about it. They want to do it. One thing I do notice is users are becoming more aware about some things, like the email address. Little old ladies working in an office admin, they are now starting to question, this looks a bit strange.
Amazon.ru. What's that?
Yeah. So users are becoming more intelligent, but like everything else, it's one person that makes a mistake, and it could be an honest mistake that causes, that situation. So, I mean, there's several aspects of the network side. There's a device side. What Andrew says is great. That's peach, but what do you do when they go to a cafe? That's the risk that you play. So,
so you've still got to look after.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no silver bullet. There never has been.
Yeah.
So when we look at the device, we want to make sure there's compliance on it. It's managed. We're updating it regularly. It's got endpoint on there. The drive's encrypted. Multi-factor authentication's in play at all times. We're looking passwordless authentication is the next phase.
That's a great example of the layers, though. So,
yes.
What if the network could then look at that device and say,
Absolutely.
actually, I'm not happy with its posture, or it hasn't had the virus definitions updated in the mandatory 10-day period that our organization requires. I'm not going to let it onto the network.
Probably the even bigger thing is that, we took something as simple as onboarding and offboarding, and I heard someone talking a while ago where, that they said, we've got like 12 or 14 different services out there, or, 20 different cloud services. How do you integrate it all? And how do you manage it from an onboarding and offboarding perspective? And integrating the network and everything else into there is something that's really key now to try and getting simplicity of management, but also visibility of what's going on. And that's probably the integration between all the different products. And networking is a key thing that has to go in there as well, as much as the device moving around. So there's lots of different aspects from cybersecurity you need to do. It's a slow process to try and do it all and then manage it all effectively. And a lot of like Aruba has, Aruba Central, that's a key thing for us now going forward, because it's that single pane of glass for the networks, which is fantastic for us. So there's no silver bullet, multi-layer, all the way.
And you've got to continuously work on it, don't you?
Well, that's the
'Cause
thing.
You can't just sort of set it
you've got to
say,
keep.
we'll come back in 2 or 3 years and have another look.
No.
Right?
So and I suppose we've been guilty at times where we've set something up and it's running. It's running sweet, great, and we'll just go off and do the next thing. But we need to come back and keep looking at it constantly, and also more importantly, being able to manage those incidents where someone fixes it, gets it going again, but we need to stop and go, well, how do we actually make sure it doesn't happen again? There's lots more tools out there for looking at that now, and a lot more things. And with everything that comes along, everything new comes along, we have to have a much more detailed look at what that product does and how do we implement it into that wider picture. But the remediation and constant improvement is it's pretty hard. It's a minefield, but I have to say we're getting better and better at it all the time.
And I think it's like you said before, this is really hard. So having a partner that can sort of say, look, Paul, here's the 10 rocks you should look under, and here's those 5 layers that we need to, sit down and let's help you kind of get your head around how this might look for your organization. That's absolutely the value that the cyclones of the world can provide.
And one of the things is, we're always on. We're always connected. I mean, if you asked me 6 years ago, IP addresses on a network, every person would have 3 devices. So I'd say we need to average 3 devices. Now I'm looking going, well, the average person probably needs about 5 IP addresses, but then all the other things that are connected, the lights and whatever else, because I've got a watch, I've got a phone, I've got an iPad, I've got a laptop.
Spare laptop.
True.
Old laptop.
So there's more demand on a network and there's more visibility needs to happen. And that's, the Aruba stuff is great for that. The automated provisioning and everything else is key.
You can't secure what you can't see. So that visibility is a really good.
But, if I go back 10 years, I mean, you go to a small company and you might have 20 devices on your network because you've got 20 staff. But that's exponential now, and it's so you got to get visibility and be able to manage that more efficiently and better. And it's key to have some of those, management tools in place. It's getting bigger and badder. That's what it is.
Yep, it's good advice. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Andrew.
You're quite welcome.
It's been really good. And look, thanks everybody for listening in to the New Zealand Tech Podcast this week. And I certainly hope that, when you step away from this episode, you will be going away and having a look and thinking around what can, myself or my organization specifically do just to notch it up at least a little bit from a cybersecurity perspective, because that's what we all need to do. There's no organization and probably no family that can go, we're perfect, we've got this thing covered, and we can now walk away and forget about it. We all need to be, looking at it on an ongoing basis. Thanks, guys, and thanks everyone for listening in. Thank you to our show partners: Aruba, Cyclone, Vodafone, Spark, HP, 2 Degrees, and Gorilla Technology. We'll look forward to catching everyone again next week. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.